This podcast is brought to you by the Ginger Camel Network. Visit us at www.gingercamelnetwork.com.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Waheed podcast. Today I have a very special guest with us, Rebekah Gomez.
Yes,
okay. She's the founder of SuperHeres Eat Plants, which is a really fun name, by the way, and I want to know where you came up with that.
Okay.
So yeah, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I'm the founder of SuperHeres Eat Plants, and I launched it actually as a Facebook page to help parents transitioning their families and themselves from a normal diet to a vegan diet. When I transitioned and the family transitioned, I realized there was very little support out there. And so that was really what it was all about. Initially, it was never meant to be this monster that has grown.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit later. Tell me about yourself, where do you come from? What brought you to Qatar? All of that.
So my husband brought us to Qatar. He is responsible for building all the big roads here. And I actually had a consultancy in London and brought that with me. And my main client was Maersk Oil.
What kind of consultancy?
It was bid work. So we were evaluating the tenders and the bids that came into Maersk. And then Maersk lost their contract and we lost our contract. And so it was, I guess it's like people who become redundant, they start to think about what else they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And food has always been a huge part of my life and my family life. My grandmother's an amazing cook. My father took that on. I took that on. And so I always knew in the back of my mind that I wanted to do something with food.
So you were always into like health and nutrition and fitness and that kind of thing?
No, not at all. I was a really chubby child, a really chubby teenager. I had no guidance whatsoever in terms of health. And I'm so glad that I've learned about it now I recently qualified in plant-based nutrition and I'm able to pass that on to my family and my kids, I hope, won't be in the same position as I was.
So how do you get into that? How did you tell yourself, this is what I'm interested in now and this is what I want to pursue or whatever it is?
So how did it happen? We were in the animal rescue world and I was on the keto diet. And that involves eating a high amount of animal protein and vegetables and very low carbohydrates. I did it because I was coming up to my 40th birthday and I wanted to look the best I could. And so I worked out a lot and my training regime was in the CrossFit world. And so the CrossFit world tends to go down the keto route.
And this was in Qatar or?
Yes, it was. So this would have been in 2015, 16.
Okay.
And it worked and I looked amazing for my 40th and I achieved my goal and it was great. And I tried to continue with it afterwards, but things started to ache and hurt. And I actually just thought I'm too old for CrossFit now and it's time to stop. This coincided with a number of other things. And I think that anybody that transitions over to veganism will tell you that there were certain things that had been happening around them and they all came to a head. It generally isn't one thing. We're in the rescue world. I was saving, a kitten had just come to my door, actually, my kitchen window. And I was cutting chicken up at the time. And I remember thinking, I'm rescuing this animal, but I'm consuming this animal. And actually, I used to have chickens when I was a child. And I remember they loved being cuddled in the winter. And so I remember thinking doesn't feel right. Something doesn't feel right here. Separate to that, my son had just recently been in hospital, very sick with a number of, he was born with pneumonia and he had some chest problems. And I'd never connected. We thought maybe it was the weather, but we weren't in Qatar when he was born. And so we hadn't connected his health with diet.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, I decided on a Saturday night that I'm an all or nothing person. So I decided on a Saturday night I was going to go vegan for 5 days and see how it worked. And it was the single best thing I've ever done. I felt incredible. I remember going to bed on day 1.
So you didn't go vegetarian, you went straight vegan?
Straight, keto, vegan.
How? That sounds crazy. How did that happen?
Yeah,
Like, why did you decide, okay, not vegetarian, vegan? Because vegan is way tougher when you're like coming from a completely meat diet.
Yeah, I'd already given up cow's milk. That had happened a long, long time ago.
Okay.
So I was already on soya milk anyway. And I just thought that something in the back of my... So a long time ago, I doubled with Atkins, and I always felt the cheese, meat, eggs diet just wasn't right. Why were we putting all this fat into our bodies? And so I instinctively knew that going vegetarian meant that I would then go high cheese and eggs, and I knew about the saturated fat. And I'm not quite sure what made me say to him that night, but it was a very last minute decision, like 10:30 at night, just as we're going to sleep. This is what I'm going to do for the next 5 days. To which he said, "That's fine, but don't become a preachy vegan, and I'm never going to become vegan." So fast forward, and both of those things have ultimately happened. But what happened is on day one, I did a full day. Like, I had no idea, even though I'm really into food, I didn't know how to do it. And so I kind of worked out that breakfast was going to be all right. I knew that I could cope with the cereal and the milk. That was fine. Or toast. I could do that with peanut butter. Lunch, I then ended up having a lot of salads. That was probably my lowest ebb. And then dinner, I had spaghetti. I had spaghetti every single night. I put on a heap of weight because I didn't know what I was doing. And it wasn't till later I realized that the same rules apply. You still can't go eating like high carb, high fat at 10 o'clock at night just because you're vegan. You're still going to put on weight. But it didn't matter, because when I went to bed that first night, I felt incredible. I remember feeling like this weight had lifted off of my shoulders, that I wasn't responsible for any animal deaths that day. I wasn't part of that system any longer. And I knew it was right then. I just knew 24 hours.
So for you, it was mainly like animal.
It was
welfare.
animal led. And it's not the sexy reason. There are 3 reasons. It's environmental, it's health, it's animals. And I'm not ashamed to say it now. But I was at the beginning, and I thought, how am I going to get people to come along this path with me? And I went down the health route on the Facebook page. But now it's all about the animals and actually the environment, because if we don't sort ourselves out as a planet, we're not going to have a civilization. And so actually the health has really come third. I would rather people eat junk food vegan than eat animals. And
a lot of people do that. A lot of people that eat junk food vegan.
Yeah.
And I think it's like my friend, she turned vegan for a few months and then she went back. But she was saying, like, when I asked her, like, what did you do? And she said, I gained a whole lot of weight because, first of all, like, you don't really know the rules. You don't have a lot of access to like information here about like vegans, and in general, the cheapest and easiest form of
French
vegan
fries
food is French fries.
Yeah.
So she gained a lot of weight, and that's
yeah.
So yeah.
But it depends where you're coming from. You know, some people do come from a health angle, and in which case they go down something different, which is called whole food plant-based. And that's where you have whole foods, you have no processed foods, and you have no oil. And that really is for people who care about their health, who care about reversing chronic disease, because that kind of diet is the only diet proven to reverse heart disease and type 2 diabetes and some cancers too. So you can come from that angle. The younger generation, they tend to come from an environmental angle because they think they're going to live forever, as I did. Not we, I did. But they're very much following the young 16, 17-year-olds who are pro-environmental right now, and they're striking because they want to see more action from governments. There's nothing really happening at the policymakers level. And so school children who are not able to vote, especially in the UK and in Scandinavia, they're starting to take a real stand in terms of, we want to see change here. And then you've got the animal activists, and there's plenty of animal activists. There's the group that everybody thinks. Let's rephrase this. There's a perspective of vegan animal activists, that they're all out to cause trouble and make people feel very uncomfortable and throw fake blood. And then there's another emerging group who are very much the let's work with industry. Let's work. We all agree that actually we don't like battery hen eggs. So let's try and fix that first. Let's work on what the popular opinion is, rather than saying you've got to be all or nothing. So I follow all three in terms of the food that we provide, and we can get onto that, but it's on the health angle because it's feeding school kids, and I feel that there's a duty of care there. And in my home, we are, I'd say 85 to 90% whole food, plant-based. But the other bit will be junk food, and there's a time and a place for donuts and French fries and chocolate and Oreos.
Wow. Okay. So tell me how you managed to transition your whole family into this. You got into it, and then you stuck after the 5 days. Was there any time you kind of relapsed or?
Yeah, completely. So I just to say that on the day 2, I had the most amazing, and everyone will tell you this, I had the most amazing amount of energy, huge energy, which has actually continued, thankfully, since. And I bounded out of bed at 4:50 in the morning and thought, I'm going to take on the world. This is amazing. And I want to bottle this. On day 5, I'd really missed ice cream. It was my one thing that I really missed. And I went with my mum, and we went and took the kids, and we had ice cream. And the very next day, all the psoriasis that I had all around my head before I started this.
What is
psoriasis? Is a skin condition. So I guess I should say that before I started the 5-day journey, I had terrible skin condition here, where it was all very sore, very itchy and red raw. And I didn't know what to do about it. After 2 days, it disappeared, completely disappeared. When we had the ice cream, the next day it came back again. So I knew then it was the only thing I'd had was dairy. I knew then that dairy was connected to my health. Our son really, he was 4 then, 3 or 4, and he never liked the taste of animals, and he never wanted to. And we had these battles at mealtime to try and bribe him and convince him that he should eat his protein. And so after quite a lot of research, I realized that actually children can be raised and thrive on a vegan diet. So my husband and I talked about it. He said, you run the household, you do what you think is best for the family. So I said to our son, look, I've decided I'm not going to eat animals anymore. If you don't want to eat animals, you don't have to. And he said, I don't want to eat animals anymore. And that seemed like this huge relief to him. And so that was very easy. Our daughter was very into eggs, and she loved boiled eggs, and she loved the whole process of cracking the shell and having one pot for the shell and then one pot for the yolk. And so I brought her along gradually, and I bought some books that she could understand because she was just 2 then. And I went down the animal route. So we started to watch quite gentle things about animals in animal sanctuaries and where they had come from, and the fact that humans don't need to do this. We can all eat plants instead and be kind to animals. And gradually she started to understand it where he got it immediately. This was in the January. My husband he remained non-vegan. And then a film came out called What the Health on Netflix. Mm-hmm. And it was the second film. There was a first one on the environment by a director called Kip Anderson called Cowspiracy. He brought out What the Health. And I knew it was the thing that was going to change my husband. So I made him a steak. And I sat him down and said, would you watch this film with me? And it immediately starts with red meat and processed meat and how carcinogenic it is. And at the end of it, he said, that's it, I'm done with red meat.
Oh, wow.
So that was the red meat gone. So that was easy. Then we went, in the May, we went into an all-inclusive holiday. And he said, look, if I'm ever going to do this, now is the time. And he gave himself permission to have whatever he wanted, but he was going to try. He also said, I can't sit there with our son looking at me while I eat what he sees as animals and him ask me, why are you eating animals? He said, because all I've got is because I've always done it or because I like the taste of it. And actually, I don't think either of those things are valid reasons to give a 4-year-old. And then he went on his own journey. So he managed to successfully go through those 2 weeks. He would have the odd chocolate bar with milk in it now and again, and that was his way of doing it. He's then done his own research, and he's a quiet advocate. So he says nothing, but if people ask, and men, and it is typically men within the business world, can be quite cruel to other men. He's a big guy, he's got huge shoulders, and thankfully he doesn't take it personally, but he does now hold his own. And I'm really impressed when I hear him talk about it, and he gives all of his science and research knowledge back at them. So he's followed his own path.
Wow. Okay, so you know how there's like this negative conception about vegans, not veganism, but vegans, because of how, like you said, the side of the vegans where they're like throwing animal blood at people and things like that.
Yeah.
And then there's also just there's so many memes online that we see about like vegans enforcing their veganism on you, or like the first thing they'll tell you is I'm vegan, and things like that. Like, how do you deal with that?
Yes.
How do you deal with like breaking that initial sort of, when you tell someone I'm vegan and then they're like, okay,
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you deal with that?
Personally, it was very difficult in the early days, especially because you are judged. You're judged because people think it's not a suitable diet for an adult. It's certainly not one for a child. When we had school parties, the kids, or birthday parties, they wouldn't make any compensation for the children, and I would always take stuff. So it was difficult in the early days. As we've gone on, things have got a lot easier, and Qatar has moved on a lot in terms of options and availability and profile of veganism. So that generally has got easier. In terms of how do you know somebody's a vegan? Because they'll tell you they're a vegan. What people don't realize is that we've not had a choice. We grew up with that decision made for us. Veganism is actually freedom from those decisions. So our parents, and it's normally parents, decided for us that we were going to consume animals and the secretions of animals. And we came along with that because it's part of our culture and it's what we do. Actually, when you step outside of that and you challenge that norm and you look at what that's doing to all of these different areas of our world, you suddenly feel free again. So that's one side. And the other is people just do not realize so for example, dairy is the largest cause of, the dairy and beef industry are the largest causes of climate warming. And governments they're not talking about it. What they're talking about is transport. And so often we will start a conversation and say, well, actually, you know what? Vegans would joke about it and say, you should be thanking us because we're saving you here. Because for all the meat that we are not consuming, and you can be part of this too, we are actually saving lives, whether human lives or non-human lives. And try to get rid of the negative connotations behind it and just do your research. Go and see, actually, you will feel 10 times better. You will be contributing to climate cooling, not climate warming. And you'll be saving lives. Like, no animal wants to be killed just for 10 minutes of our taste. So you can get into a conversation if people are receptive to it. But yes, it can be initially. The other thing is that it is way easier to say I'm vegan than to say, oh, actually, I don't want that dish, or I don't. It's just much easier to say the word, and people get the word.
Mm-hmm.
But as I say, now it doesn't really matter because everybody knows.
Yeah. All right. So was it a struggle to start on this journey in Qatar? Because I've heard from like a lot of people, a lot of my friends who've either tried veganism or who are vegans, that it has been a struggle monetarily. A huge struggle as well, because it's expensive. to eat healthier. And also because yeah, just there was just like I don't know how many years ago, but 2 or 3 years ago we had our first vegan restaurant that opened in the country. So
Yes.
yeah, so tell me a little bit about that.
So isn't it really messed up that the cost of broccoli is more expensive than the cost of a cheeseburger? And what that's all about is subsidies. So the meat and dairy industry are subsidized. And in America, if it wasn't subsidized, the true cost of a cheeseburger would be $12. And so there's a big push to try and reduce this. You can spend a lot of money and you can do it cheaply. When we first transitioned, the easiest way to transition is to buy like for like products. So things like sausages, cheese, all these processed products that look the same, they've got the same mouthfeel and they taste similar. You are going to spend a lot of money doing it that way. The alternative is to start cooking. Hey, look, I would recommend people do it that way because it's the easiest way to start. But the where you ultimately end up is saving money because rice and beans are cheap and you can live on rice and beans and potatoes every single day. And so you don't have to have all these processed products. You don't have to go and eat out so much. But if you want to cut costs, you do need to think about, you need to put more effort into your cooking at home.
Mm-hmm.
You do, for sure.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. And a lot of people don't have the time or the energy, and even like us, like for me, I eat meat, but it's just difficult to have to go, like my mom, thankfully, she cooks for us. But if she wasn't, if I had to do it by myself every day, I would probably just order from outside or something like that,
Yeah.
So
Lebanese food is very easy too. So things like, you can get lots of cheap Lebanese salads here, for example. Don't be afraid of the potato. Potatoes are cheap and they're nutritious and you can live solely on potatoes and you won't get fat from them. That's a fallacy.
All right. I was just thinking about all the fries I've eaten all my life.
Well, fries is different. You will get fat from eating all that oil.
Yeah.
The potatoes, there's no problem with potatoes.
Okay. All right. So tell me a little bit about SuperHeres Eat Plans. How did that come about?
Okay, so as I said, it was a Facebook page to help transitioning parents initially. And I soon realized that actually it wasn't enough to just say, this is what you have to do. Because as you say, people are busy. And as much as people want to make changes, they don't know how to make changes. That December, Doha Market came about in Qatar for the first year. And I ended up going there and selling my burritos. And they were really popular. I was the only vegan food provider there were at that time, and they were very popular. And then that encouraged me to start producing other types of wraps and grab-and-go food. And it all kind of took off. And by the time I got to the end of March, which was the end of the season, every single stall in Doha Market had a vegan option or were vegan. So it really encouraged me that there was a huge market for it here. I was on the Qatar British Business Forum committee at the time, which is how I know Stefan. And the principal of Doha College asked if I would come and supply food to the school. At that time, I didn't have the ability to do that. I wasn't set up. And so I went through a process of looking for a local partner, and just by sheer coincidence ended up talking to Raw Me Qatar, as you will know, the juices people, the raw food provider. And it was just meant to be, within the answer came back very quickly, which was, yes, we'd like to talk. And then we had a first meeting was about 2 hours and it was really promising. And then 3 days later, the second meeting was 4 hours and we were doing it. And that was it. And so I joined forces with them, and SuperHeres is plugged into their entire system now. And that's how we now go into schools and provide food for schools.
And are you doing this with a lot of schools?
So we're on both campuses in Doha College, and we are with the Swiss International School. From August, we will be with Montessori preschoolers So we'll be delivering a lunchbox service for 3 to 6 year olds. We'll also roll that out to the primary school students in both Swiss and Doha College. And then I'm speaking to, it looks like we've got one other international school who have confirmed. Doha English speaking school, DES, they have iSolly days. We're going to be providing all of their iSollies throughout the year. And then there are a couple of others which I'm talking to at the moment.
That's amazing.
So we're looking about 8.
That's amazing. Did you get a really good response from the public? Just in terms of like the information that you were sharing and now like all of these other initiatives that you're part of?
It's organically getting followers is difficult. And so in those early days, I would get maybe 1 or 2 and they would be friends and family liking what I did or nobody commented ever. Now things, you start to test and say, okay, well, if I put pictures, I've noticed if I put pictures up of me or the kids, they get lots of reaction. If I put something kind of quite pro-vegan, it gets less of a reaction. And so, but what you realize now as things move on with social media is people are scrolling very quickly. So they might like it and they might smile about it, but they might not
even read it
physically say they like it, but they are noticing and they notice stories more than anything. And so when I'm out and about, people say, oh, I hear you doing this and I see you doing this. And you didn't even know that those people were following you, but they're watching. That's amazing.
So what are your future plans?
My future plans, what can I divulge?
Whatever you can tell us.
There's I've got something very exciting on the horizon. And we start planning it tomorrow. So I can't say anything about that one. But you will find out after the summer. And then I'm hoping to put together a cookbook next year, probably back end of next year. A transitioning families, kids are so fussy. And then you take out certain things from their diet and people just say, I couldn't do it. I could never switch my family to veganism because it's too difficult. They're already really fussy. We've all got fussy little kids. Mine are 5 and 6 and they are just as fussy as everybody else. So I'm thinking about doing something like that, which is a bit educational, but also easy food for families.
All right. That sounds amazing. Yeah, that sounds really helpful to anybody who wants to.
But using ingredients sourced from here, because most cookbooks are US or UK based, and it's really difficult or expensive to get those products. So I'd like to, and we do this in the cafes as well. We use as many local products as we can get hold of.
That's amazing. Okay, so where can our listeners find you on social media? Please promote yourself.
So we are on Instagram and Facebook, SuperHeres Eat Plants, and there is a website, but it's more nothing really happens on that website. The best place is Instagram and Facebook.
All right, so if you guys want to contact her, please reach out to her on Instagram. And thank you guys for listening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care. I hope you have a great week. See you all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We love hearing from you. Reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter with all your thoughts and suggestions. This episode was brought to you by Ginger Camel.